All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Fail Breakdown channel. It's Tuesday, January 13th, 2026, and today we're going to be looking at a couple of different fail breakdowns, one from the morning session. A little bit of a tricky one, I think, just because of all the different levels that were in and around that zone, anywhere from 93 to 02. So we'll touch on that one to start with, and then there was a nice, much cleaner one at the end of the day at 69.86. I got IMMW with me here again today, and as always, we're just doing the best to uh, talk through the methodology that we've been studying from Adam Mancini over the last few years. So take everything we say with a pinch of salt, and always check out his newsletter for the full breakdown and the words from the master. So with that said, let's get straight into it. Not going to worry too much about the context here, or dwell too much on that. Obviously the only major point to note was we had CPI at 8:30 Eastern time this morning. Nice pop up, and then faded a bit after that, and then from the open we just started to sell down the levels, which obviously as a failed breakdown traders, that's what we're looking for. So that started to perk the interest. So let's just talk through a couple of the different levels, because this I think is where the complexity lies in this trade this morning from the morning slash midday session. So um, I'm just looking at the 15-minute chart, but sort of starting down at the bottom here from yesterday's morning session after the big move up from the 69.55 failed breakdown. We formed this shelf here at 69.93, so that was a significant level. And then from the evening session, we dipped off the evening and formed a nice low at 98 was from the newsletter, but we tagged what 98.75 or something like that at the evening session. So that's our second level of interest. And then into the London session, this little dash red line here, which I'm just drawing over now, is the London session low at 02 7002. So usually with each one of these being significant lows, the way Adam likes to trade it is to trade the reclaim and the recovery of the higher level. And it sounds a little bit counterintuitive in that, on the downside, obviously your risk is becoming higher because our stop is going below the flush low, so the risk is increasing for the trade. But I think it's counterintuitive because on the more conservative side, that once price has regained this higher level, there's a higher degree of certainty that it's going to run up a couple of levels for you. So, what are your thoughts on that, Manak, as far as
Yeah,
how to trade these levels when you've got them
yeah,
stacked like this?
so that's the thing. It's technically safer to take the higher entry, right? The only thing is, yeah, you do risk a bit of the R&R, but technically safer because if you take the lower one, then what can happen is price can bump into the structure overhead and it can reject. So for example, in the example this morning, right, you technically could have taken the failed breakdown at 93, right? But knowing that, you have to know that there is structure at 98. So if you take the 93 failed breakdown, you have to trim into 98. And if there isn't enough room to trim, then that's where I think it really is important to take the higher structure. But again, you do have the option of taking the lower structure. You just have to make sure that you're trimming into what is overhead because again, that can be resistance for potential slap back down. So I generally, if especially if there isn't enough room to trim, I will prefer taking the higher entry. But if we do have, let's say 10, 15 points of room in between, then I'll just take the lower one.
Yeah, so different options. So let me just go down into the lower time frame so we can look at the kind of action a little bit around these levels. So um, price started the flush. One thing I was noting, or just very cautious of when we started to sell down, it seems slow. And the way I'm gauging that is just kind of points per minute rate of descent. So you can see down here, this is actually the little oscillator I have at the bottom here, which is measuring points of descent from low to low to low. And we never really triggered what I consider a threshold until a little bit later. That's this red painted candle here. But in this initial descent, it just seemed lazy. And you look at it on lower time frames or even on a range, and it was just kind of choppy action. Like just bring in this chart to show what I mean. So I was super cautious of that. Just see what I'm talking about here is just these bars just being side by side on the range. And we weren't getting that scary elevated down flush that you really like to see, that are ideal for trading these. So that was my first kind of point of caution. But as we came into 80, 88 to 87 was a direct bid from the newsletter plan for anyone who likes to trade those. So that was a trade you could have taken. But what that set up when that level held, it set up a failed breakdown of our lowest level here at 93. Sorry, I'm still on the 15-minute. Let me go down to the 5 minutes at least so we can see kind of the action here. And what we got was really the second type of acceptance here. On the lower time frames, you see these red and purple painted bars. It is triggering this scary flush kind of indication here, but obviously on the lower time frames you get a lot more signals and a lot more noise. But with the second type of acceptance here, so this is the 93 level, we pushed back straight up through the level, dipped, lost it, which is ideal. Ideal because it gives you a much more precise entry in knowing when to take the trade, as opposed to if we push through the level, kind of hold the level and lift. That one I find particularly tricky, knowing when to try and take an entry. But with this, we lost the 93 by a few points and then recovered it. So there was a potential entry there, but as we've mentioned, you probably want to trim that into 98, because that's a significant low in its own right. For me, I actually took this entry on 98, so I traded the middle level here, which perhaps in hindsight was the poorest option, as in, I hadn't waited for the more conservative reclaim of '02, and I hadn't taken the aggressive entry at 93. But regardless, was still able to get a level to level move out of that. Got 5 points on that on the reclaim. So from a 98 perspective, what we had was more like type 1 acceptance, fairly straightforward. Came up, tested the level from below, dipped, and then reclaimed. And so I got in right around 99. I can't remember the time on that exactly, but I have to check my sheet. But right on that candle there. So fairly straightforward on that one. Did get a bit of whipsaw after it. How did you see that trade?
I was in the same boat as you. I took 98. I wasn't gonna take 93 because of the structure here at 98 above it. So I was waiting. To be honest, what I liked here for my entry was I really liked the type 1 acceptance we got at 98. At 1035, we essentially back tested it exactly, sold back down about 10 points to 89 or so, and then got right back above. So that type 1 acceptance, I really liked the 98. So that made me take it right around there, a little after 10:55. And then I got my trim by 11:15, just a pretty small trim there, trimming into that kind of little bit of like that resistance shelf from 0405. So I got just about like 4 points or so on that trade, and then held the runner. In hindsight, I agree. I think, you could honestly have just waited potentially for 0204. I know Adam took it at '06, so he kind of let all this kind of clear before taking it,
Mm-hmm.
because we did get another round of another liquidity trap there. But yeah, in real time, I like the 1035 type 1 acceptance. So by the time we got back, I felt like it was good to go for long. But kind of one thing I know we were pointing out all morning was the sell was definitely, a bit of a slower sell. Volatility wasn't the best per se. And obviously, given the conditions we were after a parabolic rally yesterday into CPI today. And then plus with the stop size, it wasn't something that I took full size. So it was a little bit smaller sized on my end just to kind of manage risk. But it ended up working out. I got two trims out of it and then basically held the runner all day until the end of day flush.
Yeah, great for me. So I'd only taken 5 points off of that one. And my runner actually trailed out on this wick down because I didn't want to let that trade, that runner eat too much of the profits. So I actually stopped out here. That wick got me, which is not part of the system, but at the same time, I'm obviously not looking to give too much back on these runners if I can avoid it. So yeah, Adam got in right on this candle. I would note, like, just touching on that kind of scary flush concept again. The only time that triggered on the 15-minute today was that quick kind of pulse down we had right at 11:15 or so. And Adam got in shortly after that on the recovery of O2. So just interesting to note, like that was the main kind of pulse of volatility we had really all day. Despite it being a fairly decent, what was it, 40-point sell from the high, it was just kind of a grind down. So then into the close, let's move on then to the 86, 87. We mentioned this in the Discord. It was obviously a major level, major significant low because of all the touches we had on it, kind of a cluster of lows or a shelf of lows, depending on how you want to define it. But multiple touches, a clear significant low, and then we were getting this decaying sort of pattern. Maybe it's easier to see that on the 5 minute, but this is like that. Yeah, it looks a little bit cleaner on a 5 minute chart, but that, and what I mean by that is each bounce kind of getting lower and lower from midday. So I was thinking of it like a ball bouncing and that bounce just decaying. And that's like a classic sort of breakdown pattern. Um, so then we get the breakdown of the 86 level, which is obviously the sort of trigger for us to go on alert and start stalking an entry, and then that turns perfectly into a failed breakdown. So I think maybe the unique point about this is the acceptance. So just disclaimer, I think both of us have read Adam's newsletter at this point, for a change, mainly because we were interested to see how he traded the morning session. But he called this as being excellent acceptance. I think you read it as acceptance. I was actually away from my desk, so I didn't really read it as anything. But let's talk through that. So, why don't you explain it from your perspective, what you were seeing there? Because it doesn't
Yeah.
look like an awful lot. I mean, you don't see much on the 15 minute.
Uh,
I'm on the 5 minute. I don't see much.
Yeah, you know what? You might have to zoom in if you can to a 2 minute chart for me because
Mm,
this is the I'm just in hindsight right now because it happened within like a 5 to 10 minute period. The 2 minute is kind of where you could probably in hindsight see it the best, but essentially a couple of things here, right? So you had low a day here at 69.83, right? That's obviously the big level that we're watching, but right above you have essentially a shelf that had been forming all day at 69.87. So we would need that to clear really to long. And from 350 to 4, I mean, sorry, from 340 to 350, essentially we had a little bit of acceptance here. So at 340, we go ahead and basically hit 87 and then reject back down for 3 points down to 83 and a half or so. And by 346, 348, we kind of do another round of that. We hit 86, 87 again, come back down to 85. So those were kind of two little rejections. Again, very small. Like I agree. You definitely have to zoom in and you're kind of in real time. They're not the biggest acceptance rejections, but they are two 3 point rejections or so from that shelf. And especially what I liked about the first one was the fact that we hit 87, basically back tested 83, bounced off of it. Second time, hit 87, are basically trying to sell off and really only get, 3 points before kind of getting momentum back up again. And on that momentum streak with those two rejections, I kind of liked it. Um, so, I think with acceptance too, like we always say, it's not a pure science. Like there's no like set amount of points something needs to be lost and gained by for it to count as acceptance. You kind of have to weigh it out in real time. It's a little bit contextual with how the session is going, what the volatility state is like. So for me at that point, like I said, I that's kind of what I used to enter. I was very curious, I think, on if Adam would see that or not, or if he used an NAP. So I was actually quite happy to see that he saw the same thing I saw with the acceptance there, and he entered off of that and didn't wait for NAP there. But yeah, that's kind of what I saw. Definitely a little bit trickier, but the follow through then after mock hit was really really nice, and we got that nice end of day classic ES shenanigans.
Yeah, great. I think that's a great point you raised about the 83 low day. I didn't even have that marked on my chart, and as I say, I was
Oh,
away at this
really?
point. But just I'd left shortly after the morning session. But seeing, having marked that on the chart, seeing it push up into the significant. Oh my gosh, my pen size has gone out of control. Hang on. Seeing that push up and then hold at the previous lower day,
Yeah.
and then bounce
I mean
back
that
up.
that's what I used, and that's kind of what got me long there.
Hmm.
But yeah, like there's no exact science with it. It's a little bit of screen time. It's a little bit of just contextual clues for the day, to kind of take that. So
Yeah, and it had been a slower day
yeah,
in general. I mean, reasonable range for the day, but price really wasn't moving up and
I mean
down
the
very
the
quickly.
midday was just chopping between essentially 99 to 87. We were in a 10 point like box pretty much from 12:30
Yeah,
to 3:30. The afternoon had been very, very slow.
yeah. So I was wondering if there was a way of trying to quantify it in the within the volatility state of the day. I did actually prod Adam on X to see if I could get a response from him on that one, but I'm not going to hold my
Be
breath
a
on
good
that.
answer if we could.
He is always very generous. But usually, what I'm looking for on like the 20 range chart is to see like a bar print, at least one bar print to the downside, and there wasn't any of that. So that's why I was a little surprised to see him put in the newsletter. It had excellent acceptance. Um, but
Yeah,
anyway,
excellent. Is it excellent's an interesting take. I definitely thought it was like tradable and it was good. And again, I used it. Excellent's an interesting way to put it though. I don't know about excellent, but
strong words. Hey, not going to question the boss. Just trying to learn. So yeah, some couple of good lessons today. I think how to look at stacked significant lows. They were all within a profit take of points from each other, and then gauging acceptance on a lower, slower day, and what perhaps good acceptance looks like when the day has been a bit slower. It's not always going to be nice 5 point, 7, 8 point swings up and down, clean moves. So we just have to take each day as it comes and treat each failed breakdown as the unicorns they are, and try and just follow the rules and apply them to the situation of the day. So with that, anything you want to add to close? I think that's covered most of it.
yeah, no, I think that's pretty solid for today. Um, so yeah, two nice trades to kind of look at. Um, so we'll see what tomorrow brings.
Sounds good. Hopefully a little bit more volatility. Like I say, I missed out on this
Hopefully.
end of day trade, so A little bit sad there, but that's okay. We'll just wait for the next one. There's not too many days we don't have a failed breakdown, and so I'm sure there's a good clean one just around the corner. All right, guys.
Yeah.
With that, we will catch you in the pre-market prep tomorrow and in the Discord. Appreciate you guys. Bye for now.